Hello everyone, welcome back to Cardmarket Yu-Gi-Oh! Today we're talking all things 2025 and looking to the future in 2026. Today I'm joined by none other than the wonderful Joshua Schmidt. How are you doing, Josh?
Hi, I'm doing great. It's nice to be here again, always a pleasure.
Yeah, should be fun. And honestly, if I do say so myself, it's been quite the year for Yu-Gi-Oh! We got all kinds of new archetypes and playable meta decks. We got crazy new hand traps. Everyone gets their copies of Mulcharmys finally. And yeah, we even managed to get a brand new format for Yu-Gi-Oh! Can you believe it?
I couldn't quite believe that when that happened. I think that was one of the biggest news for me as well this year. I mean, of course, we're not quite going in chronological order if we're starting with Genesis format, but you put it out there.
I mean, yeah, why not? Let's
pretty
dive in.
about it.
I'm excited about it. We're all excited about it, right? Yeah, I think that was sort of the biggest surprise for me of the year, definitely, was having a new way to play Yu-Gi-Oh! After all this time, it feels like the one thing the community has always begged for. Just, there's Time Wizard stuff, sure, and everyone loves playing Goat, loves playing Edison. It's good, but you just have all these modern cards that were releasing in these sets that you just had nowhere to actually play these lower power level decks, right? So Genesis feels like a way to finally address that issue and give a reason for all these other cards to sort of exist in the game. So how have you found Genesis? Have you been playing it a lot, just a little bit? What do you think?
I've been playing it a very good amount. I've been playing it at locals. It's actually been adopted by my local game stores, which I thought was really nice because I've heard that for some people in some regions, that's not been the case yet. But in my region, there's been 2 locals that have started doing Genesis right away. And the numbers on those have been great, honestly. They've been pulling almost the same amount of people as the regular locals, which I thought was awesome.
Wow, yeah.
So I've gone to a couple of those, and it's really felt like exactly what you've said. It feels like it gives you a place where you can play some strategies that aren't quite powerful enough for Advanced Constructed. And stuff like Radiant Typhoon, now has a home where it's actually considered to be one of the best decks in the current format for Genesis. And that is quite nice because now you're pulling those secret rares, ultra rares out of Doom of Dimensions and you actually have a use for them.
Yeah, and it gives those cards value as well,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
That now suddenly, when you have these packs that have 1 or 2 secrets that are in the meta decks and you need your 3 copies, and then all the value of the set just becomes centralized around these 1 or 2 or 3 cards, and yeah, nothing else you pull is worth anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's nice to see the generally positive reaction to Genesis. It's nice to have a way to play Yu-Gi-Oh! That isn't the super hyper competitive. I mean, of course, Genesis, at the end of the day, people are still going to try to win. It's still going to have top decks, competitive decks, whatever you want to say. But the way they're approaching it as well, with the communication on Genesis is kind of also part of this announcement and new format that's completely shocking to everyone, right? I don't think we've ever had this level of communication from Konami about pretty much anything, right?
If it's existed before, it's been a while and I don't really remember it that well, but it's been very refreshing with Genesis format for sure. And it's worth noting that it's not their first alternate format they've put out there. There's kind of been stuff like, I don't know, Rivalry of the Warlords or something like that.
Of course.
But it definitely feels different in the way they do approach this one, because it really feels like they want this one to succeed and they want people to play it. It starts with the communication, but it also includes the way they're running events for this format. They're not just putting the rule set out there and go okay, here, now you play it. But they actually, provide tournament structures for this at YCSs, for example, like the most recent one at YCS Bologna. We had Genesis Invitationals, which are public events that actually give out very good prizing, really incentivizing people to play the format. And what's especially nice in Europe, which is what I felt like at YCS Bologna, you can play them on the Friday. Even if you're mainly an advanced constructed player, you play the qualifier on the Friday, and you can qualify for the invitational on Sunday, which is kind of just a nice to have plan B.
Yep.
Which, hopefully you're not going to need it, but if you happen to not do so well in the main event, you can play the Genesis Invitational on Sunday, which awards an actual Shonen Jump Dark End Dragon as prize card, that's real prizing, alongside a giant card Pot of Greed for now, which I guess we'll see how that develops in the future, but that is a really nice way to get people interested in the format because it shows that they care about it.
Yeah, definitely. And, having all these Like all this support, all this backing, all this like communication with the blog posts. We're getting regular point updates. And not only are we getting regular point updates, we're getting them to say, hey, here's why we're changing the cards that we're changing. We don't even get that for the actual ban lists, right? So we get all of this background information of, hey, you know, we saw these decks are kind of strong. People don't seem to like the play patterns of these cards, so they're being adjusted in this way. It's kind of like a very bright looking future for Yu-Gi-Oh! In the Genesis format. So even if you have your problems with Droll and Lockbird,
right?
I'll say it. But even if you have problems with that card, I think it won't be long until it's addressed. And you know,
I think that's a good point, because I do think that needs to be said. The format is not perfect yet, right out of the gate, because I feel like that is almost impossible with how large the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card pool is to just come up with a list of cards that are already perfectly pointed for the beginning of this sort of format, which is why I like that it seems like they're getting the community involved. It seems like they're paying close attention to what's being played, and they have a relatively short time window to react to stuff, which I think is nice. But there are some things, you know, at the qualifier that I played at YCS Bologna, I got hit with a 31-point Rongo lock, for example, which is like, you know, kind of ruined one of my rounds, which I'm sure is going to be adjusted in some way, shape, or form. It's just a matter of they do need to get better at that eventually to hit some of this stuff before it happens, because otherwise it's just going to be always the newest archetypes which have no points yet. And then, you know, like you're always going from like one thing to the next. Even if the updates are quicker, at some point you're going to have to get ahead of the stuff, right?
And that's kind of where I assume they're trying to go with it, is like they're going to start sort of synchronizing the set releases with the product with a pointless update. So suddenly these new archetypes that are releasing won't just be like 0 points in Genesis, because that seems a little ridiculous.
Which they have done with Doom of Dimensions, right? I believe, if I remember correctly, on the point update that released alongside the set, there were some cards that already had some points. It was just definitely on the lower end, where, like, for example, Radiant Typhoon didn't get any. Which, on the one hand, I think it's nice. I think it's refreshing to be able to have a place to play that deck. At the same time, like, just release, if they're going to do that every time, you're definitely going to have some archetypes that are going to be obnoxious when they release on 0 points and just get to play everything else they want.
Well, and that's, let's imagine a world where, like, Mitsurugi or, like, Habakiri comes out in the new set and Genesis format already existed and it had no points. Like, we're just going to deal with that in advance and Genesis at the same time for, like, however many weeks.
4 to 6 weeks, I guess. But even there, I feel like it'd be more reasonable to put some points on it immediately.
Exactly. So it seems like everything they're doing with Genesis is going well so far. I have a lot of hope in that format. And hey, if you haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh! In a while and it looks too complicated for you, Genesis is a good middle ground between doing more than GOAT and Edison, but still not having to go full crazy meta advanced format. So I definitely recommend it for anyone watching this who hasn't played it. And speaking of all the support they're giving to Genesis, giant cards, Shonen Jump promos, they also started giving us new prizing for the main events.
Yeah, we've been asking for that for so long.
Again, something the community has wanted for so long, and we're actually finally having it in 2025. We have these stamped promo exclusive cards that you can actually make, you know, some money off of by selling them, you know, which is, I think that's great. Like, so many other games do this. I don't know why Yu-Gi-Oh! Never tried really to do it in 25 years. What do you think about that?
I don't have much to add other than, like, it's been a long time that people have been asking for this, and it's always seemed like such an easy solution in terms of, like, it doesn't cost them much to produce a couple of cards, you know. It is, at the end of the day, for them, just a couple of, just a little bit of cardboard they have to print. But of course, it's going to hold a lot of value for collectors, for players, if they choose the right cards, which I think is, I guess, the biggest problem I have with it for the beginning is some of the card choices, because the way it works is if you make day 2 at a YCS, you receive a prize pack that has 1 card in it out of a selection of 10. Some of which are really nice, some of which are like some classics from back in the day, like I think Shaddoll Fusion is in there, for example, which is the one that I got at YCS Bologna, which I thought was cool. But there's also like Gale the Whirlwind, but there's also Gaga Magician, for example.
Yeah, right.
Which I guess is kind of like part of opening a pack is like having the chance to pull something really nice or something that is not so nice. You know, you gotta, I guess, to keep it exciting, you want to have some variance in there. But I really feel like maybe the Gaga Magician is maybe a little bit too low on the low side. But
to make the highs feel high, you have to have low lows, I guess,
Sure.
is their approach to it.
I think that's the logic behind it, which I guess I can kind of get behind. But it'd be nice if everyone got something that was at least decent. And I think the Gaga Magician is like just a little bit on the...
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's top 16 is the effect veiler, is it?
Top 16 is a stamped effect veiler, and top 32 is a stamped card trooper.
Right. So even with that, like, card trooper is like, yeah, it's kind of it's an iconic card. People like seeing it again. But compared to effect veiler, which is like an actual staple that you can use still to this day in all your decks if you wanted to, maybe not all your decks, but just comparing those two cards in terms of their playability, it would be nice for a top 32, which is a huge achievement, to have a card with a little bit more playability, more in line with the effect veiler.
More in line with the effect veiler, and also I think even for the effect veiler, you could argue, while it is an iconic card and still holds up to this day as a decent card, you could have chosen a lot stronger cards that a lot more people play. Like if that is an Ash Blossom instead, that would be on a whole different level of relevance.
Of course, yep. And I mean, yeah, there's so many staple cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, right?
Yeah.
You could make it a thrust, make it a whatever, right? So who knows? Maybe within the next season and the season after, and maybe these card choices will get more and more meta relevant. But yeah, for now, once again, it really feels like the game, the way it's being run, is really moving in a good direction this year with both of these things, the new format, the new prizing. So if anything, it feels like the last pillar, the third pillar that needs to be addressed is the product. The sealed product, the main sets that we sort of touched on a couple minutes ago, that oftentimes you have these releases that have 1 or 2 or 3 like relevant cards. And before you know it, 2 weeks after the set drops, boxes are selling for like €30 online, and card shops have, collected dust with all these sets that no one really wants to buy anymore. So for me, that's sort of the last thing I'm wanting to be addressed in Yu-Gi-Oh for next year, is these product releases and making them more desirable to open them as players, right? Because if I play a certain deck and there's one new card from the set, I'm not going to go buy a box. I'm just going to buy that card as a single and then put it in my deck, and then that's it, right?
Right.
But once again, they are planning to address this when they announced that they're going to do these cool frame break, full art, quote unquote full art, serialized even cards. So we don't know what serialization they're going to get, but 1 in 100, 1 in 500, whatever it ends up being, even if they aren't meta-relevant cards and they are just Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician or, kind of the cards we're used to seeing reprinted in 1,000 different artworks and rarities, even then, these will be extremely collectible and extremely desirable. And I can see there being a lot of players or collectors who will just open tons of product in order to try to get these cards. So what do you think about Yu-Gi-Oh! Chase cards in general?
I think they should do them way more often. I always like the concept of cards existing in multiple versions, so that there is one to make the game more affordable, like a low rarity version, and then there is a super, they can be super hyper rare, I don't care, because at the end of the day, everyone can just pick up the cheaper version of the card. So that's always been my preferred model, and I see it a lot in other card games, and I've always been wondering, like, why can't we have the same?
Or even in the OCG, they do that, right?
Somewhat, yes, somewhat. Yeah. They have some cards come in lower rarities, or most cards come in multiple rarities. And I just think it helps a lot because, like I said, if you don't feel the need or you can't afford like a super high rarity of a card, you can just pick up the common or super rare version, and then if you feel fancy, if you can afford it and you want those really nice looking high rarity cards, you could get those. And I've never understood why they didn't do this from the get-go. I mean, of course, we do have the quarter century / starlights, which reprint all but the problem with those is I think you have the high rarity cards receiving an even higher rarity print. So
Yes.
like for Yami, for example, that card is already a secret rare, and that it's not going to help that it's going to get an even rarer version
Yeah.
of that card, right? And I feel like they've been kind of afraid to put a card like Yami as a low rarity card because, like you said, those cards at the moment, with the way the current product structure is, are kind of like the only thing that's holding the set together. You know, the
Yeah.
Starlights alone are currently not carrying Yu-Gi-Oh product to like high levels of collectability because I feel like they're just not quite enough and they don't look quite fancy enough. You know, they don't, in my opinion, they don't equal like an alternate artwork or like a full art card and something like that in levels of collectability and just how nice they are. So the fact that they're starting to do frame breaks, and they've also done a lot more alt arts recently, even though not in main sets, but we see like, and that's my main thing with the frame breaks and the alt arts is I really want this stuff to happen in core sets, because I think that's where we see that problem the most is with core sets. Because one set that feels distinctively different, or two sets actually, is the Justice Hunters, the side sets, which had just like a very high quality of like all the ultra rares, right?
Yeah,
where it's like
absolutely.
It's not like one ultra rare is very good and the other one is really bad. Like the worst ultra rare to pull in Justice Hunters was Canine Lupus.
Right,
which is
because you
still,
only need one of it.
It's still a meta card, it just happens you only need one of it.
Yeah.
That's why it was like the cheapest one. But everything else, like the Yami cards, the Canine cards, I'm blanking on the third one right now. It's a big one. Draco Tail, exactly.
Yeah.
All of those
We played against like 10 of them this past weekend or something. Yeah, sure.
pretty big archetypes, all three of them, and so the quality, like no matter what, that set was fun to open, I remember.
Yeah.
I opened a box and it was like every ultra rare you pull, you're like, yeah, I have use for that one.
Yeah.
And the chase cards also, like every Starlight or every collector's rare you pulled likely was useful.
Absolutely.
And the other set that I meant earlier when I said it was nice to open was like the rarity collection type sets where you had those alt arts and stuff like that. And the alt arts for the large part carried that rarity collection, like the one with Nibiru, Diabellstar, Cartesia and stuff like that. Those to this day, I believe, are some of, if not the most expensive cards from that set, even though they are just fancier versions of cards that you could pick up as commons.
Yeah, and I mean, imagine those rarity collections and that you have these alt art cards, and they easily could have just been like, oh yeah, get a Nibiru Starlight, get a Diabell like quarter century, and you're just like,
Which all existed, I think.
We've seen this before, you know what I mean? So doing these alt arts really does help, especially when it is with these like very meta relevant cards. I think giving players a way to personalize their deck, whether that is with multiple rarities or multiple artworks, I think that's always going to be a good decision, and it's always going to lead your enfranchised players who may already have all the cards they need to then open more product and try to get the new versions of the same card that they're playing anyway.
I would really like to see that happening like when the card originally releases. Like with Diabellstar, for example, I would have really liked to see how it would have went if, let's say, Diabellstar, the original artwork, would have been a super rare in Age of Overlord instead of just a secret rare that immediately demands, I don't know what it was, $75 from people. Give it a super rare version and then make the alt art, because everyone knows this is going to be, they knew this was going to be their main lore character for a season. Why not print a fancy alt art right from the beginning?
It's true.
And make it super hard to pull. Make it one per case, one per 5 cases.
We all remember Dragon Master Magia, don't we? That's
right. But the only problem with that card was that it was the only print. Right?
It was the only print. It was only in that rarity, and like compared to the OCG where it was in 3 different rarities in that set, and then it comes here, nope, you gotta pull the 1 in 5 case like Magia. So I do totally agree. I think doing multiple rarities of the same cards makes a lot of sense, and even give the Starlight an alternate art, make it even more collectible. If you're gonna go all in on that style, why not? And what you mentioned before too about the rarity collection, that's also why everyone loved rarity collection so much, because you had the chance to pull like any of the cards in any rarity basically, right? The players who wanted to bling out with Starlights could, but the players who wanted reprints of, you know, a card that used to be $50 and now, oh, it has an ultra all of a sudden, like, great, now I can play these cards. So rarity collection also feels like a highlight for product this year. Both Bonanzas, the other name, right? It was Bonanza.
I think some of them are from 2024.
It started in 24, and then it was like Stampede, Bonanza, Rarity Collection 1 and 2, I think, were 2024. I don't know. It's all the same to me at this point.
Been a while.
Either way, Rarity Collections, all of them, very good products. And then you also mentioned Justice Hunters, which I feel like is a good way for us to talk about the actual meta decks of 2025, which was very, very refreshing. I don't know about you, but starting the year, we had Ryzeal and Malice. Suddenly you could pick, there was 2 different decks that were at the top level. You didn't just have to play one single meta deck.
What do you mean? You could pick between Snake Eye and Tenpai.
Yeah, Snake Eye or Tenpai, or you could play Runic or something like that. Yeah, you definitely could not. But yeah, starting the year off, it really felt like you could sort of choose between these 2 decks, and they were both such high power level, and they both played so differently from each other as well, that it really felt like players had a chance to like show their personality a little bit more for the first time in a long time in high level, top tier competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And then by the time Justice Hunters came around, was this like the best deck builder pack we've ever had? Like all 3 of these decks on release were like meta relevant playable?
You could definitely make an argument that that was probably the best deck building pack of all time. At the same time, it's kind of been a trend recently where the deck building packs really set the tone for the metagame more than they used to, which is the same with Ryzeal and Malice actually, which both came out at the end of 2024, but also in a deck build pack, and they were super strong right out of the gate, which in the past, sometimes, I mean, these deck building packs have given us some of the most meta relevant archetypes in recent years. You know, they gave us Labyrinth, they gave us Runic, they gave us Rescue Ace, Pearly, all of those released in deck build packs originally, but what a lot of them have in common is that they weren't playable right out of the pack. So I remember when Amazing Defenders came out, which I believe was the set that had it definitely had Rescue Ace, but I think it also had Pearly. And
that sounds right. Yeah.
Those were simply not really playable yet. So I remember in the beginning, everyone, like, the set didn't feel that good to open because you didn't have anything to do with those cards yet. And most importantly, people didn't know they were going to get good yet. So you kind of had to guess, like, am I going to pick these cards up?
Yeah.
And this kind of like it always puts the Yu-Gi-Oh market in this kind of like weird space where the cards aren't dirt cheap yet because everyone knows they could get support, but then like they're not expensive yet because no one is not confirmed yet.
Yeah.
So you're like, do I pick these cards up or not?
No one's given up on them yet, but also you spend all your money and can't play them. So like,
also, you might just not get good support.
That's right. It might never come. You might wait 2 years and they never print.
Even worse, they might print support and it's bad, and then you know it's bad, and then the cards aren't worth much anymore.
Yeah. So I think Justice Hunters, it really set the tone for the year that we had these 3 new decks. We still had Ryzeal and Malice. So suddenly there's 5 meta decks that everyone can sort of pick between whatever their favorite is. And they all just like played so differently from each other. And I don't know about you, but I felt like every player I knew like suddenly had their flag stuck in the ground for one of these camps that was like, oh yeah, I'm Draco Tail for life now.
Yeah.
This is my deck and I'm gonna play it forever, right? So that's also a really cool feeling. Like, it just starts a lot of discussion in the community, and I thought Justice Hunters was like a grand slam in terms of deck building packs. Like,
I also think Justice Hunters was an awesome set looking back. In general, 2025 archetype design, as someone who's been pretty vocal about like my dislike of some of the power level stuff that's been going on in 2024. Like, if we looked at the power level of 1-card combos in like the Yubel deck or the Snake Eye deck or even the Tenpai deck, which was a 1-card combo deck but going second.
Yeah, right.
Like, a lot of these decks just aimed to activate or resolve a singular card and then win the game off of just creating so much card advantage, which I've always felt like made the games very volatile to an extent.
Yeah.
And that isn't gone in 2025. I will not pretend that Normal Summon Dormouse or Activate Habakiri or Normal Summon Ice Ryzeal aren't super strong 1-card combos that lead to a lot of card advantage. But I think one of the things that I've learned playing this game for so long is that this development always takes a decent amount of time. You know, you're not going to have a super unbalanced archetype and then print a super balanced archetype, because that is not going to stop people from playing the thing from before.
Of course.
Right? Of course, you can always ban stuff, which they have for Snake Eye, Yubel, Tenpai. ban or limit a bunch of things. But even then, it just turns out some of those decks would still be more powerful than like a super balanced deck that you make. So it always goes in steps, and I think the important news for me in 2025 is that things are going in the right direction. For example, I think the way I feel about it, most archetypes that were designed this year are actually very balanced and fun to play against.
Yep.
When they are being played the way they were intended to play is how I would like to put it. Like we're gonna talk about some hybrid versions of some of these decks, you know, but I feel like if people play pure Yami, if people play pure Mitsurugi, if people play pure Ryziel, for the most part, I think those archetypes are pretty fun to play against, which is one of my most important criteria when it comes to enjoyment of the game, is how fun is a deck to go up against, because most Yu-Gi-Oh decks are fun when you pull off their stuff, when you play them. Like
of course.
A Malice combo, I understand why people like playing Malice. My point is it's not fun to play against Malice, right?
Yeah.
It's not fun to sit across, and I don't believe that Yu-Gi-Oh always needs to be a zero-sum game where one player has all the fun and the other player has none of it. I think when I play against Draco Tail, even if I lose, I feel like most of the time there was a real game to be played, and I enjoy that a lot more.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I think in general, card design for this year was a lot more in that direction of let's have a back and forth interaction-based game. I'm gonna do my thing, but you're also gonna like get to do your thing a little bit, and by the end there will be a winner. It's not I play this card and you have no chance anymore, right?
Right. At least
mostly.
The concept of it was there, right?
Yeah, it's a lot more in that direction than it has been in recent years with things like Snake Eye and Tenpai and all those kinds of designs. But in terms of card design, I think we have to talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the snake in the room.
The reptile in the room.
The reptile in the room, which is the Mitsurugi Habakiri specifically.
Yeah.
Habakiri is one hell of a card.
It sure is.
And I think you touched on it a little bit, but the main problem with Mitsurugi is how versatile it is to just slot in with all these other engines, right? It's so efficient on its own with such a small package, and Habakiri does so much of the heavy lifting of that, of course, but just being able to slot it into Ryziel or slot it into Yummy, and suddenly you're playing two top-tier meta decks on top of each other, and you have two end boards. Like you get the full Ryziel or full Yummy end board and the full Mitsurugi end board at the same time, and it kind of makes you scratch your head a little bit and be like, what were they really thinking with this one, right?
Yeah, especially when you don't even need to draw both half of these engines. You can actually just go, like, you know, when they came out, you could still, if you had Ryziel combo, you also had Mitsurugi because King of the Fair Limbs existed.
Exactly.
And if you had one Habakiri, that was also Ryziel because it makes a rank 4, so that's duo drive. Same thing with Yami, because, you know, Zombie Vampire surely is going to hit a Yami name.
Yep. Or
Yami just makes Herald of the Arclight, links it off, searches the Habakiri.
Yep.
And I really think that's where it falls apart, you know, when you design archetypes to be balanced. Because I am pretty certain they probably didn't anticipate people to... Maybe they anticipated Mitsurugi Ryziel, because that's kind of like close together. You know, that combination makes sense, and maybe they were fine with that one. I don't know if they saw Mitsurugi Yami coming.
I really don't think so. I think it seems like this happens a lot, and I do understand, you know, you can only play test so much as game designers, and, you know, as soon as you let the cards out into the wild with thousands and thousands and thousands of players who are crazy obsessed with this game also, they're just bound to break it. Right?
Which honestly, to an extent, is understandable and fine. You know, like, I think within the first hour after a card is revealed, there's probably more testing and theorizing being done than they can even do with the limited amount of, like, you know, people they have. So it's understandable at the same time, and you do have to find a balance here, because, of course, the easy answer is just put locks on cards, which is what people always ask for. You know, Habakiri should lock you into reptiles. Yami should lock you into, I don't know, like Yami special summons from the deck, maybe.
Yep.
Or like there's this lock on Archmage cards that says you can only summon Archmages except from the extra deck. So like the extra deck is open to you, but like from the main deck, you couldn't like summon a Habakiri or something. Which is all solutions that they should have done probably. At the same time, I understand the other side of that argument is that a big part of Yu-Gi-Oh is finding those synergies between cards and slotting some engines into other decks. You know, like to an extent, I think that's fun and creative, and you don't want to limit it too much. But I do think you have to find a balance. You know, I think there's a difference between my favorite example for this is. You know, when people combine Sword Soul and Tenny, for example, which is two archetypes that technically aren't the same, but they're kind of meant to play together.
Yep.
And also, like both of them individually are not like top tier strategies, but if you combine them, you get at the time a top tier deck, and fine, cool. But I think the problem is when you start with two decks that are already top tier and you mash them together, the sum equals more, it's more than the sum of its parts.
Definitely.
And then all of a sudden, you know, like these decks were already good enough.
Yeah, I think, like you said, locking archetypes, locking special summons to, you know, whether that's monster type, attribute, like named archetype locks, that seems like the simplest solution. And I do agree sometimes that takes some of the fun out of the deck build. Like you have Earth Machines that say you can only summon Earth Machines, and you're like, well, now there's not a lot I can do here, right? Like it just kind of, I put all the same cards in the deck that I always do, and that's as much as I can possibly make happen with this pile of cards. I would argue you can read a card like Habakiri and go, wow, this is really, really strong.
Yeah.
Maybe this is one of those times that we do need a reptile
It's
lock.
funny because they actually put it on Wosu, which is the theme internal kaiju, which
Right?
is like they put it somewhere
But like-
on a card that's completely optional and you could just not play it.
Yeah, so it seems strange that specifically Habakiri got through from any sort of restriction at all. I mean, it has, you can only use it once per duel, which is the harshest restriction you can ever put on a card.
It matters sometimes, but it's not enough. Obviously.
It's not enough on its own, right? So yeah, moving forward, I do agree. If we ever get a Habakiri 2, I sure hope we don't, but if we ever do, please just lock it. Monster type, archetype, whatever you gotta do. Because I do not want to play against 3 top tier decks
and
on top of each other.
It's a shame because at least the way I feel about it, I liked pure Mitsurugi a lot. It was always my favorite version of the deck because it didn't go over the top, build the craziest board. It was just like summon an IP Masquerena, summon a Futsu, set your prayers, maybe have access to Magatama or the trap card, and then pass the turn, which once again, from the other perspective, it's a strong board if you go uninterrupted, but at the same time, if I have a 6-card engine hand, I might be able to play into this, you know? And it feels different when there's a whole Yummy engine alongside it, or a whole Ryziel board, or even Fiendsmith was already a great example of this. Even myself, as a big fan of Fiendsmith, always enjoyed playing the Fiendsmith control deck way more than any of the other combo decks that just like make a moon in the middle of the combo and then get the Caesar for free.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up too, I think, is the extra deck is also so good at facilitating these types of bridges between archetypes, right? Whether it is the Moon, or it's the King of Feral Imps, or even like cards like Granite that just search your Fossil Dyna to lock the board at the end of your combo. This like kind of extra deck generic search or generic summon, like that's also the kind of stuff I'd like them to sort of keep more of an eye on moving forward. That, hey, like, we all know Granite exists, we all know King of Feral Imps exists, like maybe we should either remove those types of cards from the extra deck, which is what they ended up doing with Feral Imps and Moon both specifically, or just design around it and just know that, hey, if you're gonna overlay 2 level 4s, like you have this option to go into Mitsu.
It's really hard to design around though, so I really feel like for some of those cards, eventually they're just going to have to get rid of them because it's like you want to be able to design for different types. You know, maybe you have a nice idea on what a cool rock archetype could look like, or what a cool reptile archetype could look like in Mitsurugi. You know, you don't want to always print like, oh, warrior archetype, spellcaster archetype, you know, like you want to be able to have that freedom as a card designer, I'm pretty sure, to be able to come up with a concept that's just cool rocks or something, you know? Like,
I think in general, bridges between archetypes like that are not inherently a bad thing. It is a cool design space for sure, right? And like you said, that's half the fun of deck building, is just being like, I have this one thing and I have this other thing. How do I bring them together, right? So I don't know. It's a double-edged sword, but I think they just have to be very careful about stuff like that, and they have to be very specific and intentional. But yeah, cards like Feral Imp, I think for the most part, it's a matter of time before cards like that need to
Yeah,
go
I
to
mean, the
ban
card's
list.
been around for over 10 years, and it's never really been a problem, but as soon as they print a really strong one-card combo reptile monster,
Yep.
that doesn't lock you, you're going to have other decks that are just going to search it for free.
I mean, that's the other thing. Like, reptile decks have like never really taken off in this way before, right? It's so cool to have like a super strong reptile deck, but it's just too much. They went too far. Either way, I think that's enough Mitsurugi talk for an entire lifetime. But the final card design point I wanted to touch on is what's for an entire lifetime with the Mulcharmies. So we have this new age hand trap design, which is a balanced version of Max C, essentially, is what these cards are. And unsurprisingly, they've seen a lot of play. Fuvalos specifically, I think everyone knew was going to be the strongest one, and it has seen main deck 3 of competitive play pretty much since it came out. So I kind of just wanted to get your opinion on what do you think about this Mulcharmy type of design, and what do you think about potential other hand traps could receive, I'm not going to say Droll and Lockbird, but what if we get a Mulcharmy-esque remake of a card like Droll and Lockbird? What do you think about that?
The Mulcharmies are a very, I think, polarizing but also difficult topic to talk about because there's so much to them. I think fundamentally they make sense because one of my less favorite things about interacting with modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks, specifically the modern Yu-Gi-Oh combo decks, is how irrelevant the quote-unquote fair hand traps can sometimes feel, because it just feels like, well, I mean, these decks make boards that are very strong and very likely to just win you the game on the spot, right? So the logic is you kind of have to prevent them from happening, because board breakers don't work as well anymore in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, because a lot of these decks have great resource management and also great layers to their end boards. You know, most combo decks you look at, they will search spells and traps, so if you Dark Ruler them, you know, they still have plenty of things going on. They got interruptions from the graveyard, they search interruptions from the hand. Like, it's tough to just be like, okay, I'm just going to activate like a Dark Ruler and be good, which is what you used to do for a while to handle combo decks, you know, like right after Dark Ruler came out, there was a period of time where, you know, it was a feasible answer to just activate Dark Ruler against your Baron, Appaloosa, whatever board, and then you'd be fine. Which still was like draw the out kind of situation, which wasn't ideal, but at least it worked. Nowadays, I don't think it does anymore. And the same is true for stuff like Imperm, Ash Blossom, and stuff like that, where a lot of these decks basically just, it comes down to, do you have an extra extender, any sort of name of the archetype in hand, and then you can just do the same thing you were going to do anyways. And so I think we need either, you know, which would be my preferred way, is they make archetypes and end boards more balanced, which I think is something that they were trying to do a little bit in 2024, but they, as we mentioned, they didn't quite succeed because some of these hybrids versions. But like, if, for example, Pure Yummy, if Pure Yummy was the meta deck to beat, you are not forced to play hand traps against it. You can just, that is a deck that you can actually interact with if you just let them make their board and you activate a Dark Ruler. It's actually quite desirable because they're not completely out of it, but because they do have the Yummy Surprise set or whatever, but there's a real game to be played from that point on. So this is where I would like it to be, is decks make strong boards that you can interact with and you have no need to always hand trap them and stop them from playing completely. The middle ground is having the Mulcharmies, which just basically say, the more you do, the more resources I have to play into it, which I think fundamentally is fine, but it's always been a problem with something like Max C, because Max C was way too strong when you went first. You made a board and then you said, okay, the more you do now,
that's crazy,
the more I draw. So that card was that card. I mean, was fine once a while ago.
When you special summoned once a turn, the card was totally balanced.
Yes, and it hasn't aged well, and so I kind of like that they've made these replacements, because one thing I've noticed, even though they are very powerful cards, is that some of the best Yu-Gi-Oh games I have nowadays are the ones where a Charmy is involved, where the player going first has to think about, how big can I make my board? It's not like I test, with my first search, I test if there's a Droll, or I test if there's an Ash Blossom, and like, well, okay, there isn't, so I can just go all out and do everything. Of course, people have to combo with Nibiru in mind, but for the most part, you know, you check for Imperm, you check for Ash, you check for Droll at the start of your turn, and then if they're not there, you just go, you go big, right? The Charmies are different. The Charmies make it so you have to make usually a smaller board and usually something that's worth for your opponent to play into without your opponent losing 3 cards in hand to even stop you from playing. And they can't be used when you go first, which I think is a nice touch because it gives them some balancing and they can't just be used behind a already strong board. So overall, I think the concept of Charmies is decent. Of course, they are somewhat of a band-aid fix to, you know, some decks are doing way too much. You know, I think by saying a lot of my best games are happening after Charmies, it's kind of like implying like, okay, why can't I have this more often even if I don't draw a Charmy?
Yeah, true. It is, like you say, a band-aid to modern Yu-Gi-Oh kind of gameplay is definitely very present in these cards. Because I do agree that I think there's a huge sort of skill expression when you get Charmied and you have to say, okay, like, do I summon once from extra? Do I summon twice? Like what cards do I really need to make sure I don't die next turn, but I also don't want to give them 5 draws, right? I do agree. I think that's some of the most fun to be had in modern Yu-Gi-Oh right now. But it does still have that inherent original problem with Yu-Gi-Oh that seems to just be like, yeah, just draw the card you need, and like you're 1 in 5, draw the Charmy and throw it and hope it works out for you, basically.
And win the Ash Blossom minigame that we still have.
And we still have Ash, we still have Called By, we still have all these little mini games going on. So yeah, it is kind of a band-aid to a bigger problem. If every Yu-Gi-Oh game you played could feel like it has the interaction of the Charmies without necessarily needing to see those cards in your opening hands, I agree. I think the game would be in a great place.
Which is what some decks are already doing. You know, Draco Tail is a deck that you need no Charmy against. Like Draco Tail is a deck that I've played plenty of games against where I didn't have a single hand trap actually, and it's been a completely fine game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where their deck is strong going first, don't get me wrong. It's not like I beat them up every time I go second, but like it always feels like we can actually play the game, you know? It's never like, okay, you've made your board, I look at my hand, it's like, okay, well, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, I do agree. I think this year had a lot more back and forth Yu-Gi-Oh! Matches on the table than have been in last year.
Because Pure Ryzeal was also like that, especially before Star Ryzeal when it had actual choke points.
Yeah.
And the end board was usually just like Detonator and a cross, and it's like, okay, well, I can probably deal with that. And some other decks like, you know, Pure Mitsurugi, Pure Yummy. You know, if we hadn't had all these different hybrid variations of these decks, I think Archetype design in 2025 was pretty nice. And I think that is the one thing I want moving forward, is that they design archetypes that just are being played as they intended. And I think if they do that properly, then I think the Mulcharmies are going to end up being more of a solution to some problematic decks in the format, and you might just side deck them for specific matchups, like you do with Mulcharmy Meowls already. You know, that's not strong enough to be a main deck card, but you're side decking it for like specifically maybe Malice, because that's doing a little bit too much of that specific thing. I could see that being the same thing. Like if we had a Draco Tail format, no, people wouldn't be main decking Fuwalos, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it seems like that was sort of their intended design, was to be these like side deck type cards that's for specific matchups. You say, okay, I'm going to put my Perulias in, and I know I'm going second, and I'll get the advantage. It just turns out Fuvalos is strong enough that you main deck it, and you hope you get one off. But yeah, I do think this design space of like retooling these older hand traps like Maxi into a more balanced version that fits the modern game instead of this like 15-year-old card design that they had no idea what the implications of it would be in 2025. I think it's kind of an interesting idea. And I think next on the chopping block has to be Droll and Lockbird. So if you could see the future and you see this Mulcharmy type Droll and Lockbird card, what do you think we're looking at? Will it be the same sort of effect? Like it maybe draws you a card per time your opponent searches their deck, something like that. What are your thoughts?
I would definitely prefer that over what we currently have. One of my main problems with Droll is something that I alluded to earlier, which is the fact that it doesn't really have any sort of skill expression, and it's very, very uninteresting in terms of the gameplay it provides, because you just check for it once at the start of your turn. You make your first search, you look at your opponent, you're like, anything on res? They say no, and you're like, okay, well, now I can go all out. Or they say draw, and you have nothing to do about that. It's not like, how much can I do? It's just you look at your hand, you're like, okay.
You go, oh, my turn's over. Yeah.
These cards now do not work anymore.
Yeah.
So, and I really would like it to be either, it could be a Mulcharmy that draws you cards, but I also theorized something. We actually did that on my stream once. We tried to make a replacement for Droll and Lockbird. One of the key things that I wanted it to be was like it's not supposed to be good behind a board.
True.
It doesn't have to be completely unusable going first, because that's one of my least favorite things about the Mulcharmies is that like they are kind of forced to main deck Fuwa, but going first you just have this arbitrary like chance of drawing one or two of them and playing with less cards than your opponent.
Yep.
I would like, ideally, try to make a card that has like a very small thing you can do with it going first, but then it becomes good going second. And I think in an ideal world, it would also work somewhat like Nibiru, because I really like what Nibiru does to the game of Yugioh, where it has an impact on the games even where it's not even being drawn. You know, like everyone has to combo with that card in mind.
Right. The threat of Nibiru is enough. Whether your opponent has it or not doesn't really matter.
Exactly. And so what I was thinking of, or what we were thinking of on stream, was a card that you can maybe use at any time on the opponent's turn, and it does something depending on how many times they have searched, right? And it becomes increasingly stronger the more often they've done it, so that you have to think about like, okay, am I going to really make that 4th search or that 5th search? Because that card is going to get increasingly more powerful the more times I do it. And then you put like a couple of effects and you like apply these effects in sequence, depending on how often your opponent has added a card from the deck to the hand this turn. I think that'd be kind of awesome.
That sounds really awesome, actually. That's a great idea. And yeah, especially if everyone knows this card exists, and then it becomes that game of like, well, I know I searched twice, so he'll get this effect if he has it, but then if I go to 3, he'll get that one, and that one's actually really bad for me. So
and it starts getting really punishing in like the 5, 6, 7 range, and it's like, do I really search that next engine piece or endboard piece? Like, do I really search the searchable trap card at the end of my combo? Do I search it and then lose to that card, or do I not? And it's going to lead to some games where you don't even have the card, but your opponent just chooses not to go for the full board.
Right.
And I think that'd be pretty cool.
The same kind of half board mentality that you get under the Charmies.
Exactly.
You go, how far do I have to go?
Yeah.
That's a really clever idea. I like that a lot. Are you telling me your Twitch chat is actually intelligent?
I don't know. They're going to pretend like it was their idea.
I'm sure it was all you. I think Yu-Gi-Oh's in a great spot. I think everything that's happened this year, I've looked at and I've said, wow, it feels like all of a sudden Konami's like really cranking up the heat. I don't know if that's just because TCGs are more popular than they've ever been. The competition is fierce. We got like One Piece nipping at our heels. We got Riftbound brand new on the scene. So it's more important than ever to show people why Yu-Gi-Oh is awesome. And I'm personally very excited to see what 2026 brings. And I'm sure you probably feel exactly the same.
I feel exactly the same. I'm pretty positive about a lot of things that, like, the direction is right. Not everything is perfect yet, you know, like I've had my problems with Malice, I've had my problems with some of these hybrid decks like Yami Mitsurugi or whatever, but overall I really appreciate the direction that things are going, you know, the price support, Genesis format, the ban list decisions as well have been pretty on point this year, especially the last one where they hit like the dimensional barrier and all that kind of stuff. Like, it was a lot of good things that happened this year, and ultimately I don't even care what the reason is. I just care that it's finally happening, you know?
Exactly.
And especially after the things I felt in 2024 about like Snake Eye, Yubel, Tenpai. I don't want to go into it too much. You know, trauma response and stuff.
That's kind of it. Like, you know, we've kind of been through the ringer lately. So looking back at everything that happened in 2025, it's like, oh my God, this was an amazing year for the game.
Right. We're not quite there yet, but the way things are going right now, I'm not.
It's all going in the right direction. And I'm just super pumped for 2026. So stay tuned to Cardmarket Yu-Gi-Oh for all the stuff we'll be doing in the new year. And we'll have Josh's stuff all over the place. Click his links, check him out. He's awesome. And we'll see you in the next one.